This is Open Air, a weekly show co-produced by Asheville FM and local groups working to improve the lives of people living in the Asheville area. Opinions expressed on Open Air do not represent Friends of Community Radio or Asheville FM. If your community group would like to produce a series or episode for broadcast on Open Air, email openair@ashevillefm.org.
Hey, my name is Josh Hampton.
And I'm Kevin Mahoney.
And this is our very first inaugural episode of Life on Purpose.
This is a radio show about all facets of recovery, whether that would be mental health or substance abuse disorder, combinations thereof, combinations of homelessness and people that are not in touch with social determinants, employment, anything that affects somebody's wellness in life. We're going to talk a lot about health. We're going to talk a lot about our community, because this is the environment that we have to exist in. And if the community's sick, we're not going to be very well ourselves. I used to say that to doctors at Mayak. Sure. Why don't you go into how we came to this name, since it was an arduous process.
Okay, yeah.
It was fun, though. It was fun.
So we were back and forth on a couple of different names. I had one that I really liked.
You did.
But I think the consensus was that it was kind of played out. It's overused. It fit what we were doing here pretty well. I'm just going to say that I wanted real talk. But
with R-E-A-L.
Yeah, R-E-A-L.
Uh-huh.
But so, within Sunrise, we all know this peer support thing we're doing, we can't do anything on our own. It takes a collective effort. And so we carried over that theme into coming up with a name for the podcast. And we asked throughout the organization, got suggestions, created a voting form, and sent it out. And the winning name was Life on Purpose. So
it kind of fit. It resonated.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So here we are, the very first episode of Life on Purpose. I'll go ahead and say I am a person in recovery. And this radio show is loosely based around recovery, life situations, really just life experience, firsthand experience, and that could fit in any area. So I'm looking forward to what this is going to be as we move forward. But today, this is kind of a get to know your hosts. And yeah, here we are. We're going to.
So we deliberately really didn't have a script to go off of. I do have some things in front of me, maybe to bring up if need be, but it's really a conversation between Josh and myself about recovery and our recovery. I'm a person in longer term recovery, and I tend not to use that term because my given day today, I am in recovery. Yeah. Past is not here anymore, and the future hasn't happened, so I tend to live right now. And I'm lucky to be where I'm at, like super grateful.
Well, you're doing great. I know you are a inspiration to I want to say everybody, but I can't speak for everybody. I know you're an inspiration to a lot of people, and
it's because I'm super old. That's why.
Is that why?
Uh-huh.
You got a long
older
time.
Older than dirt.
Nah, I wouldn't go that far. Wouldn't go that far. So yeah. As we kind of mentioned, we are both employees of Sunrise Community for Recovery and Wellness, but I would just like to say that the views and opinions that may be in this radio show, I'm not saying podcast, because this is a radio show. This is on the radio. This is not a podcast. So the views and opinions that are expressed in this radio show are not reflective of Sunrise as an organization. They would belong to Kevin and myself, independently, separate from Sunrise.
We're not going to get too far outside our recovery lane. Sunrise in general espouses many different forms of recovery. We don't have one path, if anything. And the way I teach peer support, it's our job is open your mind to what's possible, hold that judge for 1 second, and let somebody finish their thoughts. If it doesn't align with you, find a way to align it. And you're not out to fix anybody anyway, so it's their job, and you're just here to help. I'm just here to help.
Yeah. True words have not been said this morning. So, yeah, this is going to be a get-to-know-your-host day. I think just giving a little bit of information about what this may look like in the future. We plan to have members throughout the community come in, and I'm sure it will be a lot of recovery-based life experience, but not necessarily specifically recovery. Just people in the community making those connections and talking about their experience.
All right. It's some of the ideas I had, again, beyond substance use and mental health issues, is neurodiversity. That's a word that's creeping increasingly into the regular conversation. So just like harm reduction 10 to 5 years ago, with harm reduction, what's that? And everybody complained about it and fought about it, even not knowing what they were fighting against. Neurodiversity and disability culture, or differently abled culture. I want to bring that. That's the wave of the future. Again, it's not too far away. So I want to, again, community education is going to be part of our deal too.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I know we're talking about harm reduction. I think a lot of people had misinformation, or they just had opinions that they had taken on for whatever reason, and they didn't really have any facts to back those up. And I've found, not everybody gets on the other side of the fence where they're for harm reduction, but a lot of times if I'm able to talk to somebody, just really give them the correct information and just educate them on the evidence-based practice behind harm reduction, it seems to clear a lot of things up, and I've seen a lot of attitudes change towards the subject.
So the cool thing about being around in Asheville, I've been here since 2008, is watching how things seep into the culture. And again, not so long ago, you mentioned harm reduction, and it was a hostile reaction. It was like, you're just advocating for drug use, and you're giving out needles, and you're perpetuating the situation. I said, no. I said, we're trying to keep people alive till something else comes along. And my deal with talking to people is, you cannot win. I don't fear you can win an argument. You can't change people's minds. So what I do is let the evidence build up over a period of time and say, hey, 2 years ago we had this, 3 years ago we had these statistics, and now we're substantially better off doing what we're doing than not. And people go, oh, and people themselves have had a chance to have this soak in and go and get more used to it. People don't like the change. I mean, everybody talks change. Yeah. Nobody likes to change.
Well, it's scary sometimes. People are uncomfortable with something different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this was a thing that now it's found its traction. Now let's move on to the next thing we can all complain about.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to throw it in there that Sunrise has an amazing harm reduction program. Shout out to harm reduction at the SSP. All the amazing work y'all are doing.
That's Safe Syringe program.
The Safe Syringe program, yep. But yeah, Sunrise has a lot of awesome programs. I'm sure we may hit on some of them throughout this radio show, but since we're on the subject of harm reduction, I just want to throw that out there.
Cool.
Doing amazing work.
And if we brag on Sunrise a little bit, it's because we're really happy to be where we're at. I personally have not been involved in a work culture that is so synchronous. And again, with 50 plus people, we started off with 3 many years ago, 7 years ago. It is like there's nobody that you can't have a convo with, and there's nobody that wouldn't drop everything they're doing and help you right at the moment. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's unique. I don't know of another work environment that's like that. Not at all.
So let's talk about you.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
We got to talk about me now?
Let's talk about you first, at least.
Oh, all right. Well, what do we want to talk? What should I talk about?
Let's talk about what brought you to this space, this moment in time right now. And again, you can expound on moments of your past or whatever you're comfortable with. But let's start there. Like, what got you here?
Okay.
Here in this chair.
In this room right now, recording this radio show.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that could take...
Well, it can take 50 minutes.
10 episodes, yeah.
It is what it is.
All right, so just a little bit about me. I was born in Burke County, North Carolina. My parents were split up. I wouldn't say that I had it bad as a kid. I didn't want for anything. For whatever reason, I felt like I was missing something. I needed that something to make me okay with me, make me okay with life, and I never understood how people seem to just be doing this life thing without something outside of themselves to change the way they felt. So I would say early on, about middle school, I started dabbling in recreational use. And just to sum it all up real quick, you know, I've been legally involved, substance use involved, criminal activity involved, you know, the whole deal for most of my life, I would say, since middle school. And it just progressively got worse. And one day I heard about peer support. I was in the county jail in Catawba County, and Dwanez Hopkins, shout out to Dwanez, he put me on to peer support. And I didn't realize that with a record like mine, with my history, that I could have a job like this ever. And so it didn't come together right away. That was probably about 10 years ago. And, you know, but I made the effort, you know, this time around in recovery. I feel like this is the only time that I've ever not just wanted something different, but really had that change of heart. My whole thought processes have changed, and that was a process in itself. That didn't happen just because I decided I wanted to, you know, to start my recovery. But yeah, so I put in the work. I got certified, and here I am, peer support specialist. Couldn't be happier with my job
Remind
situation.
me what age middle school is, 6th grade?
Okay, I'd say about 12. Yeah,
Okay.
It was 7th, 8th grade where I was at. I know some start in 6th, but
Did you finish high school?
I did. Well, that's another story.
So-
I've got an adult high school diploma.
Same here. I
yeah.
had a GED.
Yep. I actually got suspended for 10 days on exam week the first semester of my senior year in high school. I think, well, I was out in the parking lot smoking a cigarette, and I didn't realize that I still had a 40 ounce of OE under my seat from the weekend. And, you know, exams were about to start. Me and one of my friends wanted to get a cigarette in real quick. And here comes the resource officer and the principal. And long story short, they searched my car. They
Yikes.
found that 40, so I had underage possession of alcohol. And not only did I get suspended for 10 days, I, you know, had a criminal charge behind that as well. Yeah, and so after that, I was like, you know what? I'd heard about the adult high school diploma, and that's the direction I went in. So, but it worked out for the best.
When did your light go on? And I always call it the epiphany moment where you said, okay, we call it in clinical change talk the pre-contemplation phase.
Pre-contemplation
Going
phase.
to contemplation. Now you have a clue.
Kind of when you start getting a few moments of clarity here and there. Wow. When did that start?
Because there's always a starting point. And usually people might not quite get it right away, but they don't go back to where they were before. Sometimes, I mean.
Well, I want to say the first time I went to prison, but I don't know if that was really even.
And we're talking prison, not jail and not county.
Yeah, prison.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I want to say that was the first time I was clear-headed in a long time, but I don't even know at that point. Like, I knew that I didn't want to go back to prison. I didn't want to keep screwing my life up and disappointing and hurting the people that I loved and that cared about me. But I don't think that I had a true desire to have something different as far as my lifestyle, really until March of 2021.
Wow.
Or 2022, not 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
And honestly, that took me looking at a lot of prison time. And I am a father. I have an amazing 6-year-old girl. And, you know, through this time in recovery, I have made more of an effort than ever in my life to kind of renew that relationship and actually be present in her life. And so I think it was the fear and the desperation this time that I just really didn't want. I didn't want the negative consequences anymore. So even though maybe my intentions weren't the purest, like I just didn't want to go back to prison, right? That through some time, I did started to have a change of heart, change of mind.
Who helped you during this time? Or what helped you?
What helped me? Again, I would say the biggest driving factor behind that was that I didn't want the consequences anymore. It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to do anything different, but I finally realized that if I keep doing the same thing, keep living this lifestyle that I thought was who I was, that the only thing I was going to get was going back to prison, overdosing, and maybe, losing my life.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, everything.
What keeps you going on a daily basis?
My little girl. My little girl does. And the more time I spend with her, the stronger that grows.
So his face just lit up. You can't see this, but he was beaming.
Yeah, exactly. I was beaming.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but she's amazing. And honestly, just keeping it real, if it weren't for my little girl, probably instead of getting into recovery and changing everything this time around, I would have just continued along the same path, and I probably wouldn't be here right now.
You want to talk about your program for a minute?
Problem gambling?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sure. Well, problem gambling.
Is it a problem? Really?
Well, yeah.
ESPN doesn't think so.
No, they don't. So with the legalization of sports betting in North Carolina, I feel like just based on the data from other states that have legalized sports betting, several years ago, it's I hate to say like it's not looking good for North Carolina, but just looking at the data, I feel like the need for problem gambling services, whether it be peer support, recovery coach services, clinical services, are definitely going to increase. I think it's going to catch a lot of people off guard. There's a whole different population of people that, for whatever reason, wouldn't have betted on sports when it was against the law because they just don't do things that are against the law. Now that it's legalized, I feel like there'll be that whole separate population of people that get involved and are just not prepared or don't know how to set the limits and keep themselves in check and end up getting to a point to where they do identify as problem gamblers.
Here's like a double question. Is problem gambling like substance use in terms of the buttons that it pushes in some ways?
Yeah, for sure. There's so many similarities. There are a couple of differences, individual characteristics for each. But yeah, the same brain pathways, the reward center, the dopamine that is released. And I found through my research that it's really the process that is addictive, not necessarily the win, because the same areas of the brain light up with an almost win, a near miss, I think is what it's called, as they do when there's a win, a big win. So, yeah, I would say there's more than just similarities.
So since this is coming our way, when is it, March? Is it like legal?
What I've heard is probably before March Madness. So what's going to be the time?
What should people look out for? Okay, if I had a checklist saying, here's my warning list in case, my brother or somebody in my family. What should people keep an eye on, even in their own their behavior list?
Well, let me say this first, like talking about keeping an eye out for problems within the family. Problematic gambling is often referred to as the hidden addiction, because unlike substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder, there's no obvious signs or symptoms. Not always can you see somebody that is misusing substances or alcohol and readily tell that that's what's going on. But from my experience, more often than not, even with myself, there's the obvious physical signs, whether it's the inebriation or just physical deterioration. And so, often it's not apparent to people in their lives until it's gotten so bad that there's no way to hide it.
Got it.
And it's often minimized. You might know the person is gambling, but they may not readily give you the information about how much money they're spending, winning or losing, how much time's being spent on it. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. But let's touch on there's a harm reduction for problem gambling. And just like harm reduction for substances or anything else, it's kind of a taboo subject to some people. And the same with problem gambling. There's a lot of differences of opinion about that. And so, in my opinion, the harm reduction for problem gambling is more useful for somebody who may be early on and be at risk more so than it is for someone who is already, head first into having a problem.
If I can get a little personal, was that part of your situation at any time?
Yeah. I didn't realize until researching for this program, like how much my behavior outside of the actual gambling related to problem gambling. But yeah, definitely I used to be at the game rooms shooting the fish all the time.
And what's that?
Shooting fish?
Yeah.
So the fish tables, it's anybody from Hickory or Burke County area probably knows because they used to be everywhere. There'd be five game rooms in a 2-mile radius. So shooting fish, there's a big screen, and you've got these fish or dragons or different characters that are flying across the screen, and your bet is your bullets. And so you've got a little joystick, and you aim your cannon, and so you multiply your wins. Like your multiplier is how much you bet per bullet. So it's really easy to run through some money, and it's got that aspect of like a video game with it as well. And yeah, that's what I got stuck on.
You just totally enlightened me. I thought you were talking about dice or something, and I'm like, it's actually an electronic thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know. Again, it's been so long since I've even thought about going to a game room, but I do know, like, when I go back home, I'm from Hickory. So when I go back to Hickory, I notice, like, a lot of those spots are closed down. And I think, like, when I was in my active gambling, they were open, and legislation would get them closed down, and then they'd open back up. They'd find a loophole through it. But they seem to have been closed down for a long time.
One thing about Hickory, and I had read this a couple of years ago, from like far back as I can remember, is that after that furniture factory closed, like Hickory may have the largest unhoused population living in and around the woods up there.
Like per capita?
Yeah. For this neck of the woods, for western North Carolina.
What year was that? I should know. I feel like I
Not
should know
long ago.
when it closed.
I was astounded. I was like, Hickory? It's like, that's not just, the Asheville area. We have our own situation down here. I mean, but yeah, it was an eye-opener.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'd like to keep my eye on our backyard because this is where we live at and this is our environment. So, just have the best information that we can put out, not dabble in rumors. Can I ask you what's in your toolbox?
In my toolbox?
Your wellness toolbox. Right now, break it out.
I will say, like, I'm a member of a 12-step recovery program, 12-step fellowship. So definitely staying in contact with my network. I have a sponsor. And, I'm far from working a perfect program. But yeah, just making that effort to stick to my program and do the few things that my sponsor has suggested that I do on a daily basis, and staying in touch with the network. I know that's always in my toolbox. I can use that anytime. If one person doesn't answer the phone, there's somebody else who will.
What do you think of the theory that, I don't feel, again, personally, that there's not a magic book, but I do feel organizations such as AA and NA and 12-step fellowships, peopleships, it's that community that keeps people better.
It is, yeah.
It's not just reading mystical material and tracks and coins, and it's good to track milestones. I get all that. It all makes sense. But if I didn't have the community of Sunrise around me, I would be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, and for sure, like, the Sunrise community is also in my toolbox. I know, like, I don't have to necessarily reach out to somebody in my network that's a member of the fellowship. That sense of community, connection is the opposite of addiction.
Absolutely.
And so whether you were established previously within a community or it's your very first time in your life, coming to know that sense of community, I think that's huge. And just being able to connect with somebody that has lived through some of the same experiences that you have and is in a place that you think you might want to be at now, it helps. It helps the journey for sure, because you're not alone.
The super unseen killer in our society is isolation and loneliness.
Yep.
It's like the hidden deficit.
What was we were talking the other day about the mice, weren't we?
Yeah, the Pleasure Hotel for mice. That the experiment was set up that one water dispenser had substances in it that were addictive, and with nothing to do, it was like the mouse would run over every 5 minutes and sip that water and keep sipping it till it killed it. But they built a hotel, kind of like a play park, where they had something to do and something to socialize, and they didn't use the drugged water.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. And I love Dr. Gabor Mate, who was here not so long ago at Crown Plaza. And he's this tiny man. I mean, you can stand next to him. He's like 5 foot something. But he's such a dynamic presence. And that's where the idea of connection to community is the opposite of addiction. And there was a journalist called Johan Hari, British journalist, that did something, Encountering the Scream. He took that theory and made it into that book that was made all the rounds, and all the pundits were talking about it. So yeah, just talking about the things behind addiction, and these are the things we want to bring out to people we're talking with right now. We want to talk about ACEs, and if you hadn't heard about adverse childhood experiences, it's a thing. Mm-hmm. And we're going to bring all this out in due time. We're just kind of previewing and touching base on some things. You could do a whole thing on problem gambling.
Oh yeah,
easily.
For sure. And so those ACEs, that's the thing with people who are at risk for developing a problem with gambling. Also, it's
really?
the same. Yeah, that's one of the similarities, between that and substance misuse disorder. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's the same. So scenario there.
What the ACEs is a survey. It's 10 questions about abuse and neglect between 0 years and maybe 10 and further on, depending on the person. And if you have 3 or more, people have a tendency towards physical stuff like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, dietary stuff that's going to lead to problems, smoking, and will also lead to behavioral and emotional issues later on. I think, and my personal theory, I have no evidence, is that I was susceptible to combat-related PTSD because I was a 10 of 10. I answered 10 questions positively, so I had 10 points without even knowing it, going off into the world. So friends of mine that I served with are perfectly okay. They're insurance salesmen in Greenville and doing well, and I crashed and burned in a spectacular fashion. And I'm like, what happened? I'm a smart person. What did I do? What did I do wrong? It's not what you did wrong. It's what happened to you later on. That's the question. And it's also, that's a destigmatizing question. It's not what's wrong with you. I had a lady that was happening. She goes, I'm a total failure. Failed my kids. I said, what happened to you? She goes, nobody ever asked me that. Tell me about your family. Yeah. And then we go back and peel the layers. Not clinically, not psychiatrically, but just people, just talking. Our job, just talking to people. We get paid to do that. How cool is that?
It's awesome. So I feel like you've kind of opened the door up so we can talk about you a little bit now. You've given a little bit of history, but could you talk about, just how you got here? How did you end up in this studio?
I ask myself that daily, actually.
Yeah.
How did I get here?
Is it because you can't remember, or you just?
It's a little bit of both. Yeah.
I'm just joking.
I have to pull my biography up in front of me. I'm so old, I don't have it here in front of me here. I'm looking at the Watchdog actually. I asked for Watchdog. My life was I can break it into 3 big chunks. So I'm close in on 70. So it's a lot of life experience just in general that I survived. So anytime you survive something and you can bring it forward, that's a plus. So college, school to college was a complete waste of time. I'd learned some stuff. I'd learned what I wanted to learn, and I didn't learn what I didn't want to learn. So at age 24, I said, I've got to do something with my life. So I went into the Air Force, and I studied. I maxed out on the language exams, and they said, you had an aptitude for languages. I said, well, that's pretty good because I never went to German class. I didn't know because I never showed up for high school, most of it. So they sent me off to Monterey, California, where they have one of the best language schools in the world. You're in class 8 hours a day. I was there for 2 years. So if you can't learn something like that, and the motivation was you either pass this class or we void your contract with the Air Force, and you can go guard planes up in Nome, Alaska at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, enjoy that for the next 3.5 years. But people flunked out. It was arduous. But I said, I am drawing the line in the sand. This is where I'm going to make my stand at as an adult. And it taught me adulting. Air Force was great for that. Not so great on educating what they didn't know at the time. It's, again, the stuff that's stress-related and that causes PTSD. They didn't educate us. So when I got out of the Air Force, that's the really short version of my Air Force career. There were so many adventures, so many different languages and dialects, culture. When I got out, I was not prepared for civilian life, and I ended up on the street, or something like the street, because I was squatting in my own house that was a shell, because it had no power. Everything, services had been cut off. I was bankrupt. I had filed for Chapter 13 and was just about as destitute and I hid because I was so ashamed of everything. I just hid it, basically, in my own house, which was not a house. It was a shell. Had some run-ins with health. I woke up twice in the emergency department, and they said, your heart stopped. And they said, did you do that on purpose? I said, I don't know. They said, well, it looks like you did. So I had 2 escapades with that. And the second time I was like, I said, I got to start getting a clue. So I got involved with social justice programs and community stuff in Augusta, Georgia, which is kind of the exact opposite of Asheville because there's nothing to do in Augusta. It's a pit. They have the Masters golf tournament is it. And if you're not hooked up to the golf course or the Masters or something like it, or renting your house out, that's the extent of culture.
So waking up in the hospital that second time, that
was my white light moment.
That was your white light moment.
Yes, and it began. It didn't get better all at once. I started volunteering for a church. There was the UU Church, Unitarian Universalist Church of Augusta, 200 people. They were all scientists and worked at the school, worked at the college. And went to the soup kitchen, liked it. They put me in charge of the soup kitchen. I moved up through that hierarchy. We started an addiction ministry. That was one of the first of its kind. UU's are pretty progressive in social aspects.
Addiction ministry. Could you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I mean, of all things, me in a church, and it's not biblical. It's not that kind of canon, but it is strong on social justice. Strong on, has a 400-year tradition of community, It's really an American thing. If you wanted to if there's an American religion per se, spiritual practice, it's not spiritual as much as it is practical. Feed people, visit them in prison, just like the golden rule for anybody else.
Yeah.
So I got involved in that, and I felt better doing that. Volunteerism saved my life. And in 2008, I got a phone call to come work at Four Circles Recovery, which was a cash cow where it was hiking and camping for kids that have privileged backgrounds, super privileged in some cases. That furthered me. So I, relocated from there, brought my cat up with me, found a place to stay, camped a week in the woods, had a week off, and I found work on the week off with an ACT team. It was it turned into Easter Seals. The company went out of business, but Easter Seals took it over. ACT is assertive community treatment, so working with fairly affluent people in 1 week in the woods, and then working with urban, homeless, unsheltered people that week off. It kept me super busy, and the woods healed me because nature is a self-contained like healing bowl. There's nothing better than just having a cup of coffee at 6 a.m. in a rainstorm before the young people would get up, and I was just like, this is the best thing in the world. I'm getting rained on. It's cold, but I'm happy.
You were talking a lot about service. I know being of service to others, whether it's outside the fellowship or service work within the fellowship, or we work in a service position. That's been crucial for me, in my recovery. Definitely kind of get the light off of myself and get me outside of me and just be doing something.
Get out of my head. Get out of my head. I had a variety of jobs after the wilderness, the therapy guide stuff. I worked at Neil Dobbins Detox Center for about a year. People were still smoking inside. I mean, I had to monitor smoke breaks. That wasn't fun. So that's why I didn't stay. And then worked in another ACT team with RHA behavioral, and bounced around with a couple of those ACT teams. I thoroughly enjoyed it. That's peer support. What we do it's the hardest job, I think, because it could be 24/7. There's not a lot of downtime. The folks that we're encountering are really, really in need of help. Severe and persistent mental illness, severe substance use issues, houselessness.
Could you tell me about what an ACT team does?
So ACT team is a self-contained behavioral health unit that has a psychiatrist or some kind of doctor at the head of it, and then you have PAs, physician's assistants, or nurse practitioners, somebody who can prescribe, somebody who can find and licensed social workers, and an addiction specialist, which is called an LCAS, LCSW, licensed folks, unlicensed folks, but certified like me and you, employment specialists, housing specialists. So it's the mandate from the state is you're out 80% of the time. You're out of the office. You're out there in community. And we have a crisis phone. There's no time that the people we serve were not unmonitored. Somebody was always around to call.
24/7.
24/7. And that phone can't be you can't leave it in the other room. You take it to the bathroom with you.
Yeah.
You have to answer it within 15 seconds. And
it's a quick response time.
That week is not fun. I'm going, well, I was always trying to push the boundaries of what peer support does. Give me the phone. I can handle this phone. I'm like, well, I make a mistake.
How'd that work out?
Ultimately, you learn to take better care of yourself. You sleep when you sleep, but it's tough.
Right.
And you help people out who have the phone. It's you need a break from that. Give me the phone for a night, and we could do that at least. So a couple ACT teams eventually ended up at VIA Health. VIA is the Medicaid, the managed care organization, the MCO that manages all the Medicaid money. Basically, it comes down through feds, through state. And from that perspective, I saw, God, there's all kinds of gaps in the system. I kind of saw it for the first time from that perspective because they control everything to do with, again, where Medicaid money goes. It touches every facet of public health. So I said, we don't have a peer support organization. We don't have somebody that's grassroots nonprofit. So we looked into that. Again, the short evolution is Sunrise came out of those discussions and negotiations with the work of many people laying hands on that situation. So I got lucky to be at the head of the parade for a while. And
this was in 2016?
Yep. And we were an organization before we had money. We were over at Haywood Road. It used to be All Souls had an outreach ministry. Reverend Millie Morrow, who used to be a social worker, she's over at Grace now, the big gray church on Merriman. And she just said, "You want a place?" I went around. I went shopping. I said, I went to AA. I went to places that had spaces, and everybody turned me down. She said, "Come on in." So we started doing peer support there twice a week, and then we started advertising. Hey, we need volunteers. All volunteers started, and then from there we hooked up with an older organization called the Mountain Area. I have to get the acronym right. Mountain Area Coalition for research and development for addiction issues. Oh, they were research. They were all the retired CFOs, CEOs like Larry and Blair, and retired nurses and people who were active in the field. And they just said, "Well, you got the peer support, and we got the brain power and the grant writing capabilities." So we merged, and that's what Sunrise came out of. We said, now we're a Sunrise Community for Recovery and Wellness, not just the Mountain Area Coalition for Recovery and Wellness. So merged both names, took off. We never looked back, thankfully. Then I went on to work for Mayhack because they needed peer support, I thought, at the time too, and they have peer support now. And I decided last summer to retire and with some options. So I'm teaching peer support now. So that's what brought me to this ship. Plus, I can never sit still, and I always have ideas.
I know you stay pretty busy. Every time, every other week, I hear that you're in a training.
Yep. We're teaching in Hendersonville next week at Wellspring Assembly of God. 15 new peers will come out of that endeavor.
It's an amazing thing. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunities I had with the Peer University, because I didn't really, going back to me getting into peer support, I knew that I had to get all these certifications. I had to, take these trainings, but I didn't know where to find any of these things. I didn't really know the first place to start. And I started networking. I started asking people, and somebody told me, hey, Peer University, this is what I did.
It's a great apprentice program, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So, again, it doesn't necessarily, the peer support is a job certified by the state. We have our own ethics code. We have our own board that monitors behavior and, the trainings. It's under the UNCA School of Social Work dashboard. So that's our umbrella. Again, it's peer supports. And North Carolina peers, even though it's a nationwide thing, every state has its own certification program. That probably needs to be addressed somewhere in the future, beyond my time. But so I can't work in South Carolina under this license that I have. I can only work in North Carolina, which is cool.
Right.
I don't want to go anywhere else.
Now, if you were to go to South Carolina, hypothetically, hopefully you stay here in North Carolina.
Right.
So if you were to do that, would you have to start from square one with
Yep.
their certification process? They wouldn't recognize
it's
any.
different. Nope, it's all different. Georgia's really different because they have a lot more Medicaid involvement. So they have one peer support training
And that's
class.
it.
That's it, and they have you can only certify like 40 people a year, unlike
For
us.
the whole state.
For the whole state, you got to go before a board, just like a law board. It's really tough.
Yeah.
I kind of uphold that because I don't want anybody just doing this job. But This
Yeah.
is not a job for everyone. It's great to be in recovery and great to be happy with the world, but that's not peer support. That's people can operate under illusions that's all there is, and it's not. It's just you got a lot of tools. I'm constantly studying, even to this day. There's not a day that goes
Yeah.
by that I don't bring something new to the table.
It's a lifelong learning process.
Mhm.
Continued learning is huge. I used to have the illusion that I would reach this point and like I've arrived, I'm here. And I guess maybe I did reach a point. I finally got to a point where I embraced the lifelong learning, and that became, a way of life.
Something you said not like 20 minutes ago, you said that according to my research, your research, I was going like, did you think when you were in prison you were going to say that 3 years later, like, according to the research I'm conducting?
No,
Just
not at all.
Sounds funny.
No, I thought when I was in prison the first time, like I mentioned before, I got clear-headed, but I didn't want my lifestyle to change. I was heavily involved with that thug life. And so when I was in prison, I remember it was about a month before I got out my first time in prison, and I had gotten into an altercation on the unit, and I was sent to administrative segregation because they hadn't made a ruling on it at that point. And so I still had my radio with me, and I was listening whatever the local hip-hop station was. I can't remember the song, but yeah, and I just remember I'm sitting there, and I still had this thug mentality, and my goal when I got out, I wanted to keep working out, and I wanted to sell drugs.
Okay.
And that was like the dumbest thing I think I've ever thought in my life. But again, if it weren't for all the bad decisions, all the mistakes, my criminal history, history with addiction, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be in a place where I can offer that life experience from a peer support perspective.
Yep. And we'll go into what that actually means. Again, peer support is a lot more than what we're getting into right now today. Today's a feet wet. Just kind of a general overview about stuff where we're going to go.
How long were you were in the Air Force?
20 years.
20 years.
It's a career. Yeah, I got mad because I had an altercation with my first sergeant about tattoos that were visible in 110-degree Georgia weather in the summertime, and about I should roll my sleeves down of my heavy-duty camouflage uniform, my battle dress uniform. So I said, as I am wont to do, had a wild hair and said, I'm not doing this anymore.
After 20 years?
After 20 years.
Well,
I could have done 24. I was at that rank. I was pretty high up, non-commissioned officer, master sergeant. And I still love what I did. I mean, I wasn't doing as much hands-on because I'm supervising at that level. You just sit behind a desk, and I had 200 young people to take care of, literally take care of.
Do you feel like in some ways you were still offering peer support at that point in your life?
always been a trainer and a teacher, so that's always kind of infiltrated no matter what I'm doing. I always loved it. Teaching's the best. I didn't want to be a dad to 200 people, but I'd be sitting here going like, I already tried that. You're not going to do anything that I haven't done already. Seriously. Right. And now I know how my dad felt.
Yeah.
Oh, he did it anyway.
Yeah, I think I was the same.
And that carries over into our job. We don't fix people. We can't. All you can do, the greatest experience, I think, that people going forward with this job is like, leave it alone. Don't take it home with you. If that person's going to do what they're going to do, it's like trying to win an argument. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah, and that's hard to do sometimes.
It sucks.
Yeah, because you do make those connections, and I mean, you really have to separate the work life from your home life.
Absolutely.
And I've gotten to a point now to where I'm able to do that a lot better than I used to be.
You have to do it to survive in this job field. You have to.
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to shout this blurb out real quick. Sunrise Community for Recovery and Wellness is a nonprofit staffed entirely by certified peer support specialists who utilize their lived experience to provide authentic peer support, resource navigation, and education to individuals struggling with trauma that often leads to substance use and mental health issues. You can find out more at www.sunriseinashville.org.
Hey.
And shout out to Jody Ford for crafting that wonderful Sunrise blurb.
She's like our unsung heroine because of all the media communications that she links us to.
Yeah, she's extremely, I don't even want to say helpful because helpful doesn't even sum it up. She's been amazing in just creating the opportunity for me, like bringing some ideas that I have, bringing them to life much better than I could ever think of. And so she probably gets tired of hearing my phone calls or seeing my name come up by now because it's always something. Because I just want to make sure I'm doing, with public engagement, anything that has Sunrise behind it, I want to make sure that I'm...
You're an ambassador.
Right, yeah.
You got to be careful.
Yeah, for sure.
So I also want to thank 103.3 for giving us the radio opportunity because radio is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, shout out to Jess for sure.
What else we got?
I don't know what we're looking like on time.
I don't either.
Oh, okay. So we got 3 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. Does it feel like it's been that long?
No, this is a combo, which is kind of what I was hoping was going to evolve anyway.
Yeah. I think for the most part on my end, it flowed naturally. I think you killed it for sure.
Thanks.
But this is my first time being in a studio.
I couldn't tell.
Thank you.
Yeah. I had a radio show here some years ago called Recovery Radio. It was fun. Kim Roney was my teacher here, the council person and piano teacher. So she taught me the board and how to record and set levels. And I had a great 2-year run with that. So, yeah, super fun. It's great to be back here.
Yeah, it's an awesome experience for sure. Real quick, before we wrap this up, if there's anybody in the community, recovery related, or just someone that would like to share life experience on a particular issue or subject, you can reach out to me or Kevin. My number is 828. You're
in it now.
Yeah, I'm in it now. That is my work number.
My email is kevin.mahoney@sunriseinashville.org. You can reach me that way.
That would have probably been what I should have put out there.
Well, we'll see.
It's jhampton@sunriseinashville.org.
I'm sorry. It's K. Mahoney. My bad. At Sunrise in Asheville.
You did that on purpose.
I did. I'm not getting any emails.
Just call Josh's phone.
Yeah, let us know. And suggestions are deeply appreciated. And again, we're not private counselors. So we're not in this for the money. But let us know. If we don't know, if we can't help, we can find somebody who can help. Usually. Yeah,
for sure. I think, resource navigation.
Yep, part of the deal.
That's the whole thing. But thank you everybody for listening to this conversation, and
we'll have more.
Hope everybody has a blessed day.
Yep, a great weekend. Take care.